So in an effort to continue supporting food entrepreneurs digitally during the last, especially 6 months, we launched this session called Ask an Entrepreneur, which is a virtual session where we invite successful founders to share a bit about their journey launching and growing brands, but spend the majority of our time actually welcoming questions from attendees on any aspect of your business that you'd like to ask our experts about. So we really encourage you to take this opportunity to ask questions about decision-making processes, how challenges were dealt with, suggestions for marketing, co-packing, branding, finance, anything that sort of comes to mind for you. Tyler has assured me that nothing is off the table, so please feel free. We encourage you, once we switch to Q&A, to be extroverted, forthcoming, and really make this session worth your while in getting your questions answered. So Tyler, without further ado, thank you so much for joining us today to share more about your successful CPG journey launching Kalahari Snacks. And it would be great to hear your intro and how you did it.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for having me, and thanks for that introduction. It's great to see everybody. I certainly see a few familiar faces on here. For those of you who don't know me, again, my name is Tyler, and I'm one of the founders of Kalahari Snacks. We sell biltong and now recently a crisp, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. Before I kind of get into that, though, generally speaking, when I've been on the other end of some of these conversations, one of the most interesting facts for me was how that founder, or what did that founder's journey look like to starting a brand, right? Like, where do they start from? How did they get there? What were the steps along the way? So just to kind of provide a little bit of color to my background before we delve into it. I started my career as about as far away from CPG as you could possibly get. I was in the depths of the finance industry doing corporate strategy and biz dev and a lot of finance work for a company called Thomson Reuters. So I like to say that I gained my knowledge in Excel wizardry and PowerPoint beautification as merit badges, and which obviously would be put to good use as a CPG founder for sure. But my heart was always in health and fitness and nutrition. And so what evolved from that was this, really big desire to kind of, okay, how do I get into this space? And so I started my first company called Race Pack, which is today a small athletic food distributor. We supply predominantly climbing gyms across the country with all of their healthy snacks. That's not what the company started as, and I think that's kind of a very important lesson for some. We definitely pivoted 6 ways from Sunday to arrive at that distribution model. If you don't know what becoming a distributor really entails, you might want to think that through. I basically said, yeah, of course we distribute. That sounds great, to a customer, and then had to promptly go home and figure out what pallet size ordering meant to the house, as we were working out of my basement at the time. So what that really did, though, was it allowed me to cut my teeth a little bit in this industry and learn while not running my own brand. And so we understood, hey, this is what an effective commercial strategy looks like, right? The brands that had set up a commercial strategy that allowed them to not get potentially pigeonholed down the road as a regional brand, that allowed room for national growth and bring on distributors, not just a totally direct model. We witnessed really interesting marketing strategies. We looked at packaging evolutions as brands shifted along the way. And again, providing some great insight as to your packaging is never finished. No matter how much you want it to be, it's going to continue to evolve. And what were those key moments that we watch brands like, okay, well, why did they do that? Oh, interesting. That consumer trend is hot right now. Interesting. That's what they're trying to respond to because it wasn't big enough or bold enough on their initial packaging. So we kind of started to squirrel those little ideas away. And the whole thought was, okay, well, we can sit back, we can learn, we can really focus in on consumer trends, go to food shows, meet, create other entrepreneurs. And one day, hopefully, when we figure out what we want to do, hopefully with our own brand, or maybe we just partner with somebody else, we can bring all those lessons to bear. And so this is kind of where we get to Kalahari now, where my co-founder, Brett, who is a South African, he was my triathlon coach at the time. And somehow, over perhaps a few too many adult beverages, convinced me that it would be a wonderful idea to go on down to South Africa and race an Ironman and an ultramarathon in about a week's time, which seemed like a great idea that night. Did not seem like a great idea the next day, but it is what it is. So we went on down to South Africa, and I was really humbled and privileged to be able to see the country through his eyes as a native and stay with his family. And one of the first things you see down there is that biltong is that country's unofficial national snack. I mean, it is pervasive. It is everywhere. It's in the airports, which maybe it shouldn't be because it's open air and hanging, but that's a different story. It's in the grocery stores. It's at the vineyards. It's at people's homes. So immediately you're struck with, okay, well, what is this, right? And having run the race pack distribution business, we were at least hip to some of the meat snack trends and knew what were some of the brands were that were out there. And a few things immediately struck me. One, again, my humble opinion, we felt like the taste, or I felt like the taste and texture component of this was unbelievable. It was tender. It wasn't super dry and tough. The texture was thinly sliced. It was very different than what I was accustomed to. Additionally, the other piece that really struck me was the broad utility. Most people generally consume, meat snacks like a jerky in a bag as I don't know, road trip hiking snack. People here were using it on charcuterie boards at wineries, not in a marketing sense, but in actuality, cooking in their homes with pizzas and salads. It was, and in addition to kind of a great protein snack. And then finally and foremost, the nutritionals were crazy. It had 30 to 50% more protein. It had 0 sugar, 0 carbs, and 6 to 8 ingredients, depending on how you're making it. So what all of that meant was biltong really was at the confluence of a number of really key consumer trends that we have been witnessing. Protein's always been big for a while. 0 sugar was starting to become the devil. Again, this is, mind you, about 5 years ago now. Keto wasn't quite coming into its own yet, but it was on the rise. Paleo was still hot. And simple ingredients, thanks to folks like RX and the branding that they did, was definitely paramount. So when you looked at that, we said, wow, this is something truly amazing. And for me, it was that light bulb aha moment for my co-founder, Brett. This is a chance to bring his childhood, right? His childhood snack and his, pride, if you will, and share it with not only friends and family, but the broader country. So in 2015, we went down there. And then we basically began a very aggressive ideation, supply chain research phase on the first 6 months. And we went from basically 0 to coming up with a brand, a logo, a packaging, and getting to market by January 1. And I'd be remiss to say if we didn't have some unbelievable help along the way. One of the key things I'd tell founders early on, which is, can you identify great help, or whether that's third-party agencies, early stage partners that can help accelerate that phase, because it's a very time-consuming phase, ideation, and just get to market and start understanding what you've got on your hands or what you need to correct. So in Jan 16, we had our first bag for sale. We did an outdoor market type affair at January in Boston. I'm sure you all can appreciate the insanity that was. But we were eager to get started. And we built the business from there for the next couple of years, basically out of the basement, out of the house, up and down the street. You guys know all the independents in the area. Went in, called, and I don't want to say we harassed, because that'd be too strong of a word, but cornered perhaps retail managers and stores until they at least gave us a chance. We had no idea about slotting, free fills, any of those terrible words we unfortunately come to learn later in the CPG world, and built that awareness campaign. And then from there, we just expanded our region. I mean, New England was home, sure, but hey, thanks to some, whether it's quick Google searching, which became our sales tool, or some creative identification processes. So we basically looked at, hey, who are adjacent products? I mean, not direct competitors, but adjacent products who have store locators on their websites. And let's just start, typing in zip codes here to identify new stores we weren't aware of, right? So we kind of played to those tactics as best that we could. And then we kind of continued to grow, and we were very fortunate to gain some press, and then finally gained some attention via a VC firm called Excel Foods, who invests in disruptive food brands in 2017, and have continued to do subsequent rounds with them and others along the way to where we are today. So again, we took that New England brand up and down the street, recognizing that natural channel was going to be our home for a long time. We went with a bi-coastal strategy. We knew that San Fran on the West Coast is likely to be a key market for us, just, where our target consumers were. So we kind of had this moment in time where it's almost like planes landing, like one founder would fly in, the other would fly out for, 25 demos over 7 days or something equally as obscene. But we recognize that's how you're gonna have to do it. You're gonna have to build it brick by brick, door by door, demo by demo. And to build that awareness, to build those loyal consumers such that when we went up the food chain, right, we would already have that awareness. We'd already have that consumer basis. And that's not to say that along the way we didn't face certain supply chain challenges. It's easy to predict when you're only talking about 50 bags of product a week. When you get to the thousands, now we had to learn some really hard and quick lessons on how to start forecasting more appropriately, not just on what you need today, but what you need 4 months from now, especially if you're ordering plastics, say from overseas versus, domestic, and what those trade-offs were. And all along, obviously, we were committed more than ever to having our own e-commerce channel. And I say that with a lot of pride. We have a great online solution, which is obviously now in COVID no longer an option. It's definitely a minimum requirement for any brand launching these days if it's not something that's not doable based on your type of product. But we have 2 different channels, and we wanted to have our own channel, our own website platform, such that we could have direct communication with our consumers. And we thought that was so important early on, having that voice, having that direct touch point to get that instant feedback, to find those 1,000 loyalists who are going to become, I don't want to say meat snack zealots, but whatever the better wording of that would be, but who go out there and talk about the brand when you're not there. We had all kinds of crazy tactics to do so, and I'm sure I can share some funny stories about how we used to write a handwritten note for every single order that went out on our platform, which did become slightly unsustainable. But we'd start conversations and dialogues with our consumers, and that really is what led to a successful online platform. Not when you needed it, right? Not when everyone's trying to do it during COVID, but in the years building up to it. And so that kind of was great. And obviously we have Amazon alongside that. So which brings us to where we are today. We are unbelievably humbled and thrilled to be sold across the nation. I think we're, by last count, maybe 6,500 doors. We're really privileged to work with some amazing retailers that we've fought every inch to get in through, whether scrappy tactics or just patience, or being really proud of the product that we have, whether that's the folks at Publix or Wegmans and Sprouts. But I still personally love those little 3 to 5 location chains, because I think that they can do more for early brands than any big chain can. We now have 4 SKUs, which I'm going to now shamelessly hold up in front of the screen, so in case if people haven't seen them before. Those are our biltong SKUs: a lime chili, a peri-peri, a garlic, and the original. And then we have some product innovation, which is a whole other kind of question and learning experience. How do you innovate? How do you bring something new that is still in line with your brand's core values, so that your customers don't question what's going on here, but also is new and different, and it's not going to steal revenue from your current product line? And we just launched crisps. So basically think crispy bacon in a bag, more or less, right? I know that you guys can't see them, but just launched them this summer. And through the thoughtful brand building and pre-messaging and due diligence we did in PR and press, we were able to secure some amazing initial retailers who were just as excited about it as we were. So crisps went fully live into chain-wide, in Sprouts, Wegmans, and Central Market. We were able to sell them in a clear plastic bag. So we were, again, very, very humbled, very, very thrilled to be a part of those. And that's kind of where we stand today. And I know I don't want to take up too much time talking about this, so I'll stop there and start the Q&A, but more than happy to dive into any and all of this or something I didn't cover.
That was great. Thank you so much, Tyler, for that account of your journey, and excited to hear that you're in 6,500 stores. I had no idea that was the reach, but that's awesome. So from here, for the rest of the time, the floor is yours for our attendees. If you've got questions, thoughts, areas that you're thinking through with your business where Tyler may be able to add some perspective, please feel free to either unmute yourself and ask the question live. There is the hand raise function at the bottom, which you could use, which will let us know that we've got a couple of questions in the queue. Additionally, you could submit the question through the chat. It will come to us and we can relay that to Tyler as well. And then also just in terms of the view here, for those of you that maybe would like to just see Tyler in his awesome Kalahari t-shirt, you could check out the speaker view, which is
shameless.
Perhaps the preferred way that he would like you to see him with the logo. So who would like to start us off with a question? It looks like Anastasia. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Tyler, great to see you.
Good to see you as well.
I was very excited to see you be part of this programming, and I'm sure I'll pick your brain later on a lot of other things. But my main question, which I think will be relevant to the group, is if you could do this journey of launching Kalahari brand all over again, what would you do differently and why?
Wow. Great question. Although I would argue it's a fairly loaded question. I don't think I have one answer for you in the group, unfortunately, just because there are so many moments along the way that you gain knowledge where, a challenge back then, you now look at and say, okay, listen, I know the answer is C. It's B, it's not B, and it's definitely not D. And if you could impart that wisdom and knowledge, certainly that would be helpful. So I guess that being said, this is almost like letters to an earlier part of myself. I would encourage myself to recognize that don't let the prospect of perfect be the killer of good enough. I think as an entrepreneur and a founder, we are so focused on trying to get this thing perfect, right? And just these small little nuances of maybe a little font adjustment. We have some great partners in Nature Nurture Creative, which is a regional agency that has helped us along, and God bless them. The amount of times I'm like, I just don't think that RGB is quite the accent I'm looking for. And maybe I was right, maybe I was wrong. But when I look back, time is really critical. Time is something you just can't get back. And so I would urge founders to put your product in the briefcase and just get to selling. Just see what you've got, right? Obviously, there's a minimum standard, as they say, the MVP. So if I would go back, I'd encourage myself to be more thoughtful about that and just get moving faster and not to get so hung up on these minor improvements in my mind. That's probably what it'd be. Again, there are certain things along the way, distributor lessons or palletization of product or financing and cap raising, all of those are relevant as well. But I think that would be the big one.
Great answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Peter.
Hi, Tyler. Thank you so much. Question, we're selling retail, in other words, direct to the end user. On the financial side, how do you model what sort of the wholesale distribution is going to look like? Like who's going to take a slice of your profits? How do you get your head around some of those numbers so you know what you need to shoot for, or whether you're going to have any profit left over once you start selling through other channels? Any thoughts about that?
Let me just make sure I've captured your question correctly. So are you asking, how do I model out to understand profitability when factoring in distributors, or just direct to the store? What's your...
To distributors, when you're going to go through someone else who's going to, direct to the stores, which you can sort of figure out, but also if you're going to use distributors, or we're familiar with selling in farmers markets and direct to the consumer. It's like, but we don't know what we don't know when we start going to stores, when we start maybe using a distributor, and we probably don't even know what that really means. Slotting fees, all these different things. How should we sort of think about who's going to take a slice of us?
Yep. Really good question. And I think it's a critical one. And if I could highlight anything that we're probably going to talk about, this is probably the one that I wish that I had known a little bit more about, in particular when starting out. And I think that every CGP entrepreneur should focus on, because if you don't do it right, as I mentioned earlier, you'll get stuck, right? You just won't have enough margin to go nationally, or you just wouldn't want to. It just won't make sense. So thinking about this now early and often is a good one. The challenge, unfortunately, without kind of seeing your model, I'm not sure. So what kind of product do you sell again? Oh.
It's based on candied ginger, and then it has different coatings on it. So
gotcha.
It's sold in small packages like this.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, great. So it's not a beverage. Okay, so I'm more equipped to answer your questions. So there's not necessarily a rhyme or reason, so to speak. I think a lot of people say the minimum gross margin you're going to want to be working with is about 40 points. Now, understanding the challenges of an early stage entrepreneur is that you may not have some of the economies of scale lined up, say on your plastic, on your caddies or PFPs, however you want to refer to them, right? And what minimum shipping orders you're shipping. So I think those are things you need to look at and say, okay, let's just use 40 as the minimum. and where do I want to be at shelf? So you kind of need to kind of work it backwards. The distributors, you know, they're all going to have different prices, what they sell to the store for. They might have a list price that's called 20 points, right, from their cost, so cost plus 20, but that might not be the reality because most stores aren't paying that full boat price. So you kind of have to kind of talk to some buyers. So, you know, if we went to Pemberton Farms, God bless them, often and say, hey, look, what price are you seeing in your Unify system? And so that kind of helped us understand what Unify's expectation of a market was going to be. And then obviously knowing your independents will sell for a little bit more, maybe 40 points, you know, what have you, and bigger grocery will be closer to 30. So you can figure out the price on shelf, where the distributor is going to list you at, and then now you know to deliver to them what that's going to look like. Now, an additional slotting fees, etc. Well, those are two different questions because the slotting might be onboarding new stores, but you also have to factor in that the distributor themselves is going to require you to do certain promotions. So it's kind of like two different pieces. So slotting is relatively, I would just budget one case free fill per store, unless you know that that particular chain is going to be, just say, more aggressive. Say Shaw's, they're going to probably look to have 10K per SKU, right? But most stores are usually about to be a free fill. Sometimes it's two cases for free fill. Other stores like Publix and Wegmans are great, no free fills. That's what makes them so amazing. So I would look at it and do it based on door count. So what you need is almost like a bottoms up model, right? That you kind of plug in your, you know, doors, how many free fills. Okay, that takes care of your slotting. Then you're going to factor in, you're going to have, you know, again, you can figure out what the percentages might be on how much advertising you have to do or TPRs and price reductions. And then you have to factor in that, you know, say Unify, they're going to want a minimum of 2 promotionary periods a year. That's pushing it. And you're going to probably assume that those are 15-point OI periods. So take whatever the sales of that month is, and it's actually more like 6 weeks that they can buy in that period. And they're going to have a 15-point discount. So again, it's hard to answer the question fully without walking through the model with you, but I would probably look at it from a free fill per door, right, for a meaningful chain or even the small ones as a starting point. I would factor in a couple of 15-point OI periods for your distributors, and then you have to figure out what other kind of additional price promotions you'd likely do with those stores. So again, I hope that's probably not all of the in the weeds you'd want, but I hope that kind of gets you on the right path.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer Burney, I think you had a question. I will ask you to unmute yourself and feel free to ask.
Hi, thank you. We're a honey, beekeeping honey business, and we started at the end of October. So, you know, just like the typical farmers markets. We're in now about 30 stores, retail stores, small stores in Massachusetts. And we're trying to grow it. So we've completely bootstrapped it. But I think we're at the point where we want to bring it to the next level. So my husband and I, at least one of us, could work full-time doing this. We work full-time jobs and we're running a business full-time. What would you recommend as the next step from bootstrapping, and how did you find those investors that you know, match with our mission, et cetera?
Really good question. And again, it's probably a different answer for most. Also, just I'm a big fan of apiarists. I had some friends who were running, I don't know if they run anymore, but they're called Carpe Diem.
Yes. Actually, we know them very well.
Yeah.
We've on a couple of their accounts. So
okay. They're great folks. So I'm excited to see you guys grow. And what was the name of your brand?
We're Hudson Hives.
I like that. Okay, good alliteration. So look, there's never going to be this silver bullet answer, right? It's very much brand specific. So I think that the natural evolution obviously is what I call friends and family round, right? So you start with that phase early, and you can kind of work your way up the food chain provided you grow enough. I think you just want to be cognizant when you take capital of a bit of a question that I probably had to learn along the way, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up as a brand, right? And I think it's very important. If you take, say, venture capital money, there is an expectation there that generally comes in the form of a big hockey stick. Whether or not it's true or not, that's a different discussion. But recognizing, if you take capital from different sources, what that might mean for the business and how you're trying to grow it, and what you will be doing. So I would probably encourage you to start with the friends and family route first. Additionally speaking, one of the key parts to our early funding success was not the VC route where we ultimately went. It was additionally in building a really great relationship with a regional bank. We work with Leader Bank. And so we started small. Again, it's all about building that relationship, not when you need it. And then when you need it, they've already know you. So I got turned down from, oh gosh, I still have a bitter pill to swallow about Cambridge Trust and Savings. I'm sorry. If anyone knows them, I'm sure they're good people, but it was a very hard no, and they didn't believe what we were going to do. So anyways, we got a great relationship with Leader Bank after getting no's to all the other regional banks. Took a chance on us, and they worked with us to get a small SBA loan. That loan was $25K. At the time, I literally thought that would last forever and solve all of our life's problems. That's not the case, but still, it was a good starting point and a great milestone. I would really encourage you to explore that if you haven't already. It's a wonderful way to do it. And then as you go forward, you can either go the straight up loan route, or you can go with the line of credit route. And obviously you can build that line of credit, which is exactly what we did. We just kept building, even in times when we didn't need it. And that really served as our ability to grow. And if you're growing profitably, again, depending on what kind of business you're looking to do, the profits can kind of go back in. You can tap the line of credit to pay for the working capital needs for the next phase of growth. As the profits come in, you can kind of pay that down, and so on and so forth. So I would really encourage you to do that. And then again, find those friends and family. There's a great community. And I say friends and family, maybe not just your direct friends and family.
Right. Friends of friends.
But there's friends of friends, exactly. And getting their buy-in. And there's a multitude of ways to do that, whether engaging with people on here, or whether it's Kickstarter, whether it's what have you. I think there's never been a better time to try and do that.
Okay.
But SBA, highly recommend it.
I'll check it out. Thank you.
No problem.
Great. Okay, I think we have Brian Ruhlman up next.
Hey, Tyler. So I have a question that's kind of just thinking of myself, that moving from having a full-time job to being self-employed, working on my business full-time, and also thinking about kind of a marathon, not a sprint. So I'm kind of curious about how you organize your day, how you organize your week, how you organize your kind of planning. And I know this probably totally changes on the different phases of your business, but just for some context where I'm just getting into, I have like 10 independent wholesale accounts and working on building that to try to get to 30 in the next 6 to 12 months. But just curious in terms of how you structure your time.
Yeah, another great question, right? There's time management is key. You'll get to the point where there are never enough hours in the day to accomplish your list. So that becomes really critical. There's being busy and there's being efficient. And those are sometimes very different answers. Out of curiosity, what is your business? What do you do? What's the product?
Sauce?
What's that?
Hot sauce.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, sorry. I'm just putting the two and two together now.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so I'm just going to try to rewind as to where I was at. So I was working full time as well, and basically work on the weekends, working nights, sometimes on company time, but we won't tell that to anybody else now. And it eventually just kind of gets to a point where I had a mentor once tell me, listen, I would always encourage you to try and build it up as much as you can, such the transition won't be too painful. But there's a certain reality to, you can't expect full-time results from part-time effort. And if you're running two things and your mind's trying to kind of track with your day job, some of your function, even if it's like, on the back burner, is still going to be there. So again, that's a personal call you're going to have to make. But at some point in time, you're just going to have to recognize you're going to have to make this jump, and you may or may not know what it looks like, at least probably not for many entrepreneurs. So in those early days when we were probably in 10 accounts, the day was largely focused on a variety of different small tasks on marketing and the website and things of that nature. But again, as I pointed out back to what I wish my advice had been, is like, just get out there and go sell. So one of the fun things that we did, and I was fortunate to have a couple of co-founders, we had this little bit of a accountability type contest where we would have, I'm trying to think what it was now, like a minimum of 5 samples had to go out a day, right? And each person had to publicly state at the end of the day. And there were penalties in the form of probably beer or wine or something that was a good currency for us at the time, to ensure that it got done. And then what you can actually do rather rapidly, and I would challenge you in this goal, you want to get to 30, and I'm not sure what the time period is, but you realize very quickly that, number one, at least in the local area, it's pretty it's not easy, but it's like, hey, people want to believe in that local store. You can probably get those next 20 doors pretty quickly. It gets more challenging when you start Googling outside your radius and just type in, Pittsburgh health food stores, which you can do. But you can quickly start to do the approach of saying, okay, I sent 20 samples out, I got 10 follow-ups, and 5 became customers. Okay, so I want 20 new customers. Well, then we can just reverse engineer how many samples have to go out. So for me at that time, samples were king because you just knew what that meant. That was sales, and I could map out exactly how many doors, depending on the day, I was going to get out of that. So at the time, it was probably very much spent on shipping, samples and sales, and following up those key accounts and mapping it, and then understanding supply chain and production. And then again, the other piece, which is try to be thinking ahead. I think sometimes you get that ostrich in the sand mentality, like I'm just going to chug along and just get these doors, but you don't look up sometimes and say, well, what are the ramifications? Am I going to need a bunch of working capital if I get to 100 doors? Or what happens, God forbid, if some like Wegmans comes and says, hey man, just saw your product in these 20 indies. I love it. How are you going to solve for that? Right. So again, it's all about like what I just mentioned to Jennifer previously, making sure you got that banking relationship set up, spending the time to invest in that such that it's there, not when you're, you have it, not when you're kind of screaming for it, right? You've got it built in advance. So not an easy answer to give you, but I tell you right now, samples up the door, focus on that, focus on talking to your customers and getting as much feedback as possible.
Awesome. And do you take weekends on Monday, Tuesday, or weekend? Like, do you have kind of a normal work?
I say this because I don't have it. There were no weekends. I'll be really honest. We were doing demos so Biltong, kind of our weird competitive advantage over jerky is that we were selling to wine and cheese shops, right? Because we were selling it on the charcuterie angle. So beer tastings, wine tastings, those are Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturday nights, and Saturday afternoons. And then if you're working SOA summers, that was your Sunday as well. So it's not a badge of honor by any means. If there was an easier way to do it, I would highly recommend it. But for us, no, the reality was it was pretty much 7 by 24 for the first bit until we were able to smooth some things out, get some help on the demos, things of that nature.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, no problem.
I have a question.
Sure.
So your product is a little bit different, right? Like from the normal jerkies and stuff like that. How do you get people to try it and purchase it on a national basis? So outside of your physical area. So I have a product called Yogi Balls. It's a yogurt balls, it's addictively delicious, but people don't know about it. And, nobody thinks about a savory yogurt dish. So that's kind of like my challenge, especially I just launched in the Northeast region with Whole Foods and about 15 other stores. And not only we're going through like the whole COVID thing and I can't do demos. But then I'm thinking about, how do I go to New York every week to demo my products in some of these other stores that are like non-Whole Foods? How do I, because once people try it, they love it. They're going to buy it. But when I'm not able to be in front of people and say, hey, try this. How do you do that?
So just to make sure I captured that question correctly, it's basically how do I promote my product when I'm not there to hand sell it, especially for a product that's not familiar to people? Is that about right?
Yeah.
Yes, certainly a pertinent question for me, because biltong is effectively an unknown word, at least maybe less so now, but certainly at the beginning, nobody really knew what that was. It was bitlong or South African jerky or something like that. I have no idea. So we battle with that same awareness campaign. Also, apologies in advance if anyone hears a train going by. That is me. Our office is near the Waltham commuter stop, so I apologize for the background noise. So COVID has made this definitively more challenging, right? So at the time, our strategy was absolutely demos, and more demos. right? And unfortunately, that's just not scalable. As I mentioned, we had this, co-founders flying in and out of mostly LA, San Fran, and Texas plan. That was how we built that awareness out there. And then eventually we've kind of leveled up to use third-party agencies or demos to kind of help continue to build on that awareness campaign. So without that, now we've had to resort to other efforts. One of them I would love to claim the genius of, but it actually was not. It was born of we've got too much product on 2 of our SKUs. What in the world do we do with it? And our marketing folks and us, kind of founders put our heads together and we said, okay, well, what if we put together a trial pack, right? So we have a 2 for $10 advertisement on Facebook and social media. You can't find that deal on our website, right? Because obviously we didn't want to degrade our brand value, but we use that as effectively a bit of our proxy for demos, right? People are probably going to execute on a 2 for $10 shipping included type of price to try a premium item. So we're not making any money off it, but that's not the purpose of that vehicle. It's to drive trial. And so it allowed us to hit a larger geo-targeted area, right? With that to drive awareness. So it's kind of a bit of a multi-pronged approach. One, when demos come back, and they eventually will, demos are critical and trying to figure out how that's going to work for you. I think it's where it's very important to understand how fast are you expanding, right? So do you have enough resources to support those retailers with the requisite demos or awareness campaigns? 2, can you do anything, leverage your e-commerce platform at all via some sort of trial pack system that might not be available on your website? That's the key. You don't want something that they can buy that every day. It's a once-off purchase just to get them to try it. If you truly believe that the problem is they just need to try it. 3, you can engage in geo-targeted campaigns around certain retailers, right? So get the store list, get the zip codes, and then you can run, social media awareness campaigns that say, hey, this is my product. Here's where you can find it. Here's the North store. Here are all the great things about it. And P.S., here's a coupon, right? That's another kind of great way you can kind of layer on another layer of it. But again, unfortunately, there's no great answer. It's just kind of hard work, getting into doors, building relationships, finding those great folks who are going to be, whether it's smaller brokers who are going to be in the stores talking about your product. If you do get in the stores, I'm sure you know all too well, the cheap tactic we found was we don't have the time to be there to demo for days on end. But you know who can demo for us? Store managers. So we made every store manager our best friend. We sent them with product, t-shirts, swag, you name it. And guess what? The next time someone came in, they had a whole lot to say about Kalahari. So you kind of have to have this multifaceted approach to it, but know that nothing's going to be a good ground game. The only thing I would say is there might be some who would say that you may just want to take a little line around New York and skip it. I'm not saying that should be your strategy, but New York in particular is a very challenging market, right? It is run very heavily by DSDs who are in there every day, merchandising the shelves. Good luck parking and running around at those places. So you've picked a very, very challenging one if that's where you're going to want to go. There might be some friendlier cities, so to speak, to build that awareness where they're a little bit more receptive to new brands coming on the scene. Did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
That was great. Yeah.
I'm going to interject with a question that came through the chat here. Tyler, can you describe what scaling your production looked like from starting out, early stage, likely working with co-packer, and how you also navigated packaging to where you are today, how things changed?
Yeah, for sure. Well, how things change. I'll paint a picture for you. Again, as I mentioned, started the business out of my house, and actually more specifically the basement. And there's this side Bilco door. And what would happen would be we'd get these orders and UPS initially would just drop off boxes literally on the sidewalk. And as we grew a little bit, they'd drop off pallets on the sidewalk. I mean, literally dead middle of the sidewalk. And nothing's more absolutely just laughable than having the middle of a sleeting snowstorm, your product's getting wet, you're trying to get it inside, your neighbors are literally out there looking and going is this some form of a meat snacks Breaking Bad? I don't know what he's doing in his basement. And so that's where it started. So when you ask about scaling, just to be clear, humble beginnings. So we started off with a sticker on a bag. I know there is a deep desire for a lot of tourists to make it want to look phenomenal, right? This was not our first bag, not even close. I think this is maybe 4.0 now. I've lost track. I've got a great board somewhere that shows the evolution, which if you'll allow me, I'll show in a minute. So we started with that. Was it economical? No. Was it a pain in the butt to put the stickers on each side of the bag? 100%. But we knew that we were going to learn in front of our consumers to figure that out. So we didn't want to invest too much into that plastic supply chain early on and the tooling fees that go along with it. You know, those once-off fees can continue to bite you if you're not careful, right? You don't want to keep evolving your packaging too often. So we started off with a, basic black matte bag with stickers on each front. And we didn't really have to forecast much those days because we probably were only in, a similar kind of 10 doors. So that was easy. As it scaled though, it definitely got more challenging in the sense of a couple things started to happen. If you scale too rapidly, you really need to ensure you keep a close eye on your quality control, right? If you're making it yourself, that's on you obviously. But if you're working with a co-packer, really want to be cognizant that you set some form of a standard to kind of talk about it. And again, for meat snacks, there's going to be some variability there for us. But what is this like 80%, 90% gold standard that we could all sit here and say, okay, this spice amount, this level of moisture, this kind of cut, so that we can have an objective, rational discussion, not an emotional one, about what my product's supposed to look like if we rapidly scale and you try to take some shortcuts. We did experience that. And that was a very challenging lesson to learn. Then from there, to be fair to that person, they said, listen, if you're going to scale so rapidly, you've got to start planning it out more than week to week. So we went from week to week planning to month planning. Now, if you're looking at your plastic supply chain, that was different than our meat supply chain. At the time, we were sourcing our plastic internationally. And so with that lead lag, it was roughly 10 weeks once everything was done. God forbid you didn't get held up in customs. That world has changed now, for the record, and I would highly discourage anyone from doing so, at least in the COVID-filled world. We flipped, thankfully, to domestic packaging, which is a bit more expensive on a per unit basis. But when you factor out the shipping, because everyone ends up air freighting their plastic last minute to get there for that giant need, it probably nets out to be about the same. So all of a sudden now my packaging lead lag time went down from 10 weeks down to say 6. So thinking about all those things, you really have to start being thoughtful about looking around the next quarter, around the next corner, right? If you think you're going to bring on 50 new doors, let's just say your goal is to get from 10 to 50 doors, as you mentioned, and then next quarter you want another 50. Have you thought about that? Do you have the requisite working capital to pay for that product? Are you factoring in that some people aren't going to pay you on time? Actually, a lot of people will not pay you on time. And do you have a good working relationship with your supplier and your co-packer to have the terms to be able to survive that, in addition to that working capital? So it becomes this kind of evolving conversation, right? You're always looking to gain further economies of scale. I always tell brands that they've asked the question, hey, have you gotten a quote for what 500,000 packages look like? How about 100,000? What is your world going to look like in a year from now or 6 months from now, right? So, and work towards that. Can you find some sort of deal that says, I can't afford 100,000 packages today. I can afford 50, but I'll commit to 100 if you give me another 6 months to draw down that additional 50. And they might say, yeah, sure, great, wonderful. Now I just got economies of scale, even though I'm not ready for it yet. So I think those are all key insights that we just learned along the way. And again, I'm sure we can dive into anything from, I don't know if anyone's actually ever thought about meat futures before, but that's a thing. Locking in meat prices for the foreseeable future and how many pounds you're bold enough or brazen enough to buy at one point in time and locking that in. Do you have any supplies or raw materials that fluctuate? I know a lot of folks in terms of almonds are obviously very popular these days in a lot of products. Almond futures are a lot worse than meat snack futures. Those prices are extremely variable. With California being a massive amount of supply and the entire state very much on fire, what is that doing, right? So think about your raw ingredients, think about your raw materials, understanding where the next economies of scale price point breaks are can be really meaningful. I know, Peter, you asked before about how do I begin to think about margin? Well, are you thinking about margin today? Or are you thinking about margin 6 months from now? Those could be very different answers based on your growth or what you're able to negotiate. So I think those are the ways I would probably think about it. But again, ever evolving, and we're learning this as we go today.
Tyler, thank you. Relative to the last question, as far as production goes, the point, I'm guessing you started maybe manufacturing it yourself with your own hands in some spot, or maybe not. From that point to where you actually have a co-packer, what did that look like?
Really good question. And unfortunately, I'm not going to give you the answer that you want. Biltong well, let me throw my co-founder underneath the bus for a second. So when we came back from South Africa, my co-founder was like, I make it at home. This is great. I can do this. And probably actually a lot of South Africans do make it at home, and you'd be almost mortified to see what it looks like. It's basically like this cardboard box, right? With a heat lamp at the top and a small little fan on one side that eventually kind of, I looked at this, I said, Brett, I don't know much about the USDA yet, but something tells me this is not going to get approved. So there really wasn't an option for us to make biltong ourselves. So for us, it was direct to co-packer. Now that has some pros and cons. I think, there's that adage that people like to throw around a lot, be a brand or a co-packer, right? Pick one. But again, pros and cons. If you start making it yourself and having that hands-on experience, you can be really dialed into as to what your product should taste like, what it should look like, what are the ingredients. And then all of a sudden, when you move to the co-packer, you can say, hey, listen, I know it's not supposed to taste like that. Here's why. Here's where I may think you've gone wrong. So kind of get to your question, I would answer this from the perspective of what we've seen and encountered other brands doing. When you're getting to the point where you get an order and you say, I don't know how I'm going to fulfill this. There aren't enough hours in the next couple of weeks. You probably have gone a bridge too far on making it yourself and may need to investigate going with a co-packer. Now, again, there are certainly examples of brands who have done it all in-house, and kudos to them. I think those are probably more the exception than the rule. So again, I think you gotta need to ask yourself the question, do I have the capacity? Do I have the ability and the willingness, if you will, the energy to not only make it, but sell it? And then eventually, obviously, if you start off in a commercial kitchen, you may be looking down the barrel of, okay, if I really want to do this myself, the commercial kitchen can no longer handle what I need anymore. I need to have my own space. Are you going to raise or be able to raise the requisite capital for all of the needed machines for that? That can be a pretty painful upfront cost that you may not want to incur right away as a brand. So again, not a perfect answer, but I think that hopefully should give you some insight as to what it might mean for you.
And to perhaps dive a little further down in terms of the manufacturing of this from your kitchen to co-packer, how did you go from, you probably dreamed up this, recipe at one point. How did you get it to the point where you were making the same recipe over and over again? Is one of the additional questions that came through the chat.
Again, another evolving process, right? The work is never finished, much like packaging. I swear the amount of nuanced detail that we probably are sitting here trying batch over batch, but I just don't think there's enough coriander. Is our average consumer probably picking up on that? I'd be impressed, but probably not. So I think, again, it's this constant refinement and recognizing the work is never done. So for biltong in particular, we worked with our co-packer to find a flavor profile that we liked. The co-packer actually was a South African. And so for him, we felt like, and he was selling predominantly to South Africans, we felt like that flavor profile wasn't quite right for the American audience. It was just a little bit different. Now, you're probably, typical South African might argue, hey, that's not what I love. And we say, yeah, okay, but for example, coriander is just a little bit of an odd flavor. Too strong of a taste is just not something you see that often. So be mindful of that, especially if you're kind of getting into the popularized, flavors from different parts of the world. That might work well there, but how does it work here? There are some classic examples of that. I think perhaps maybe to answer your question a different way, via crisps, that was much more one where it was hands-on. So, for the Southwest Verde in particular, that's a really challenging flavor to get right. I know it sounds easy, but it was brutal. And rosemary citrus the same. So we're kind of balancing, okay, you could have this much rosemary, but then you had to put up this much citrus. So you had to figure out which one did you want more of? And that constant refinement just came through 10 months of R&D, I'd say, on that one. And now you're battling taste and texture with ingredients. And as you change one, it's, again, this kind of multivariable calculus. So again, a lot of trial and error, a lot of taste testing, a lot of very, very good friends that we're thankful for giving us honest but gentle honesty opinions when we're in those early R&D phases to say, yeah, that's not going to work. That's way too salty.
Great. Well, we're slightly over the 45 minutes we had booked for this, but Tyler, I know you had mentioned that you were available for as long as we needed. So
Sure,
we
yeah.
won't go too much longer, but if there are any last questions that we have from the group, please feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, or submit the question via the chat here.
Tyler, what were some of your go-to sources for throwing questions out to sort of a community? I know Branchfood is great with that, but any other, places to sort of get feedback, places where there are other Tylers?
I would not wish too many Tylers upon anybody, but with that in mind, so I actually, to be fair, I've only recently connected with Branchfood. It's actually one of the things that I feel remiss about. I wish I connected into this community earlier on, as there were probably a lot of great lessons I could have saved myself the pain of. So I think Branchfood's a great starting spot for sure. Additionally, I would encourage, we engaged with a law firm downtown called Nutter, who's been really great to us. They're really good about holding events that are generally open to all at some level, where I think that entrepreneurs can kind of gather. So I'd strongly encourage any of those types of events. The other piece as well, which was we were fortunate to have via the first business race pack, we already had this broad base of companies we could reach out to. And, listen, I wasn't pinging jerky companies about how they were selling their meat snacks, to be fair. So maybe some non-competitive folks, but you'd be shocked. I know it's probably very, very old and tired to say, just go ask somebody. But I think that should be your best bet. Just go ask somebody. I'll never forget being in a food conference. I think it was founder of Annie's, of Noosa, and Justin's. And I think someone was asking a question about like mentorship and whatnot, and to answer these types of questions. And Justin was like, listen, my email's at Justin's. Just email me, right? I'll help you out. It's a small world getting smaller. So I think not enough folks take advantage of just an easy intro and say, hey, listen, got a quick questions. You got like 15 minutes? Sounds great. So I think those are probably 3 great starting points. Again, nothing wild or groundbreaking, but certainly if you spend enough time doing it, can really, really beneficial.
Great. And I will add a second plug for Nutter Law. We'll drop their information in the chat for those of you that are looking for legal services there. I agree, a wonderful supporter of the food entrepreneurship community, and you can learn more about their work at the link we just sent to everyone in the chat.
Yep. Will Burnett and Jeremy are great people. So I would highly encourage you guys to reach out to them in addition to their events.
Awesome. Any last questions? Otherwise, we will wrap up and thank Tyler for his time here. Okay. Well,
it's
Tyler,
no fun. I was just going to say thank you, everyone, so much. And I just want to say, I know there's obviously questions always abound. And I guess I will sign off just like Justin's did. My email is tyler@eatbiltong.com. Free for to email me anytime. And as best that I'm able, I'm happy to answer questions, hop on a call. We've been very, very thankful to receive a lot of help. And I just want to make sure that we do our best to pay it forward. Sorry, awesome. And I will let you sign off now.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Tyler. No, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure hearing more about your journey of launching and growing Kalahari Snacks and building such an awesome business. So thank you for sharing all of your advice and feedback on the great questions that were asked today. Thanks to those of you who asked questions. Please let us know if you are interested in more of these types of sessions. We'll be sending out a survey. We'd love to keep posting them if they're valuable for the community. So let us know your thoughts or suggestions or even nominations for folks that could be good speakers as well. We want to keep bringing this digital content to aspiring and growing food entrepreneurs to help them, especially in this time that has been so, has become a relatively new time for launching and growing a food company. So thank you all for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this session. Please, if you're interested in Branchfood and our resources, check out our website, branchfood.com. Check out our annual conference, which will have more content focused on emerging food and beverage startup support. And we look forward to hearing from all of you in the future. So thanks again. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Tyler. That was awesome. And Lauren.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Colin. Appreciate it, buddy.